I think there are some people who have an almost idyllic view of what has been happening in Eastern Europe recently, and who see it as the inevitable, if long overdue, triumph of capitalism over communism. How do you see it?
Well, I should think that it's fair to say there's a great deal of what I've called simplistic ideology abroad in the world. The notion that there is a simple capitalism and a simple formula for socialism, communism, and one has been defeated and the other is victorious. Actually, if the Eastern Europeans were making their way over to classical capitalism, as it was in the time of Adam Smith or as it was in the last century, I don't think they'd be at all happy about it.
Why not?
Well, this was a system which, before the welfare state and before the Keynesian revolution, before there was a softening and mellowing of the system by Social Security, that was a system that inspired a great deal of anger and a great deal of alienation, the primitive capitalism.
All right, if it's not that simple, what is it? Is it a triumph of shopping, in a sense? The lure of consumer goods, the attraction of the Big Mac and the Rolex watch for everyone?
It's more than a few things, more than one or two, certainly. It is quite clear that as a technical matter, highly developed socialism, communism, did not produce consumers' goods. It was very good at producing weapons and very good at sending men into space, and it was very good at building steel plants and electrical generating equipment, but couldn't produce out of the command system of socialism the great variety of goods, changing styles and designs of the modern consumer's goods economy. So it did have that failure, there's no question about it. But there were, I think, more important factors. This was a system that required a heavy bureaucratic apparatus. By some counts, there were 30 million people inhabiting the Soviet bureaucracy, still are. And this was a system which developed its own truth, its own momentum, and couldn't change, couldn't adapt. Capitalism, under criticism, under attack at times, did modify itself, did produce the welfare state. This was a system which had its own truth, its own rigidity, and didn't adapt. But it wasn't unique in that respect. We sit here today at a time when the Cold War, we must agree, is over, when the United States no longer has a plausible enemy, but that has not affected the bureaucratic apparatus of the Pentagon. It is still perpetuating itself and its own truths as something necessary as ever.
Economically, what are the pitfalls here? What are the dangers that Eastern Europe faces now?
Oh, these are very great. I've said a number of times that I think this last Christmas, watching these wonderful changes, we were probably happier than we're going to be next Christmas, because out of this disorder, from the collapse of the old system, a new one has to be built. And this is along lines that are new in the world. We have had many movements from capitalism to a different social order, to some modification of social democracy. That's been true in Canada, the United States, everywhere else. We have had no movement in the other direction. And I would think that there's danger of a rather chaotic period here, which will be different in different countries. I think one can count on the Czechs, for example, to manage this transition rather well. It's an orderly, disciplined economy. I would be less optimistic about Poland and maybe Romania.
All right, let's talk about Poland as a specific example. What would be the Galbraith blueprint for building a new economic order there?
I must say that I would advise the Poles to be a little cautious about accepting any external advice too readily. But I would see, first of all, the release of the consumer's goods industries to the market. I would see, secondly, an easing of the farm price structure. And I would be a little cautious, very cautious about, for example, allowing housing rents to go up very much, because whatever government does that is going to be blamed for it.
Now, you say you would advise the Poles against taking outside advice, yet in fact they have sought advice from one of your Harvard colleagues, Jeffrey Sachs.
Yes, that's right.
And he has advised what some people see as a shock treatment for the Polish economy, the elimination of many major subsidies, the elimination of price controls, the limit on wage increases, devaluation of the currency. Is that going to do the job?
He is probably a little more severe in this regard than I would be.
Some people say more sticks than carrots.
I would go a bit more slowly.
Now, it's only a couple of months, obviously, into the new order, but in Poland, it seems that there are results already. There seem to be consumer goods in the stores, food on the shelves, meat on the streets.
The problem, of course, is that these goods are now, for many Poles, extremely expensive. And this is why I would have perhaps gone a bit slower, so that people did not have the shock of suddenly seeing goods which they couldn't buy.
What is all of this going to mean in the area of foreign debt? Are foreign creditors now more likely to have their debts repaid, or less likely to see that?
Well, I would hope less likely.
You would hope less likely?
Yes.
Why?
These were foolish loans, and I would lay it down as a rule that when foolish banks make foolish loans, you shouldn't always expect them to be repaid. There are certain precedents. One shouldn't examine too carefully how well the debts on behalf of the Canadian railroads were paid.
Point taken. You talk about this being a chaotic period and the danger of further chaos. Is there the worry that the commitment to the new economic order, the move towards capitalism, is going to be associated in the minds of many Eastern Europeans inevitably with economic hardship?
I consider it one of the tragedies of the possible tragedies of this year, that liberalization and personal liberty, glasnost, will be associated with economic hardship. And that's why I would like to see all of the Western countries, not excluding Canada and also Japan, come forward with very liberal grants at this time, very liberal aid.
All right, what about George Bush under these circumstances? Is he the man for this time?
George Bush has a tendency to respond to any emergency with a stirring speech. And he has locked himself into inadequacy by his promise not to spend money and not to raise taxes. If we were available, along with the Japanese and the Canadians and the Western Europeans, with very substantial amounts of money to help the Eastern Europeans and help the Soviet Union, this would be a quite wonderful step to assure that this process will be benign, but we're not.
What in this situation should be the role of a country such as Canada? What can we do?
No question. What we should do is try to ensure, to the best of our ability, and with the use of our more than ample resources, including those from reduced armament expenditures, to ensure that in Eastern Europe and in the Soviet Union, liberty of speech and a liberalization of economy is not associated with hardship, is not associated with deprivation.
And we talk so much about what this development is going to mean for the lives of the people in Poland or Romania or East Germany. In the long run, what will it mean for our lives?
I hope that we've already grasped to some extent a world where the apposition of two great economic systems has disappeared, where Europe is no longer divided by Churchill's famous Iron Curtain, and where there is, in consequence, a hope of living in harmony, mutual tolerance, with an end to the fear of nuclear confrontation, which has so characterized the last 45 years. That's my hope. Now, my fear, of course, is that some of the old antagonisms, the ethnic antipathies, language antipathies, a spirit of extreme nationalism, could spoil that picture. And I'm not entirely confident that it won't.
Professor Galbraith, very good of you to do this with us.
The Fifth Estate will return